9 reports due every Wednesday, 16 on Friday, I said, pointing at a spreadsheet cell. This formula balances the workload projection, but it's never accurate because it doesn't account for the supplemental data from operations. Adira nodded eagerly, scribbling in her notebook. Her enthusiasm was exhausting after 13 days of this charade. Her sleek blazer still had its tags tucked inside. I'd spotted them yesterday, when she took it off during lunch. What about the workflow approvals? She asked. Do they all go through Renner? Only customer-facing ones. I clicked through to another screen. Internal reports go to Vance, except during quarter end, when everything gets rerouted to the leadership team. Adira's brow furrowed. That wasn't in any of the training materials. It wouldn't be. I forced a pleasant smile. The system was designed 5 years ago for a team of 3. They never updated the protocols when positions were consolidated. My desk was nearly empty now. Personal items packed in a cardboard box by my feet. Just some corporate pens and a company mug remained. 5 years of 70-hour weeks reduced to trash and a single box. I'll be right back, I said, standing up. Last meeting with Weston. You can practice those export sequences while I'm gone. Adira nodded, already clicking through menus. 23 years old, with a brand new business degree, and the misfortune of being hired into this meat grinder. When I returned 15 minutes later, something had changed. Adira's face was ashen, her notebook abandoned. On my monitor was an open file I recognized immediately. Position, requirements, complete, PDF. I was looking for the export template, she whispered. I clicked the wrong folder. I thought it might help me understand. The 17-page document detailed everything, all 3 roles I'd been performing simultaneously, the executive support functions, the technical troubleshooting, the client management protocols, the deadline matrices, the reporting hierarchies, the quarterly presentations, the cross-departmental analyses. This can't be right, Adira said, voice cracking. They told me this was entry level. They're paying me $42,000. Her eyes found mine, searching. How much were they paying you to do all this? 58 after 5 years, I answered flatly. She shook her head in disbelief. That's impossible. No one can do all this. I thought I was just learning your job, not replacing an entire department. Now you understand. I picked up my box. Good luck, Adira. Wait, you can't just… What am I supposed to? Panic overtook her features. They'll fire me when I can't do this. I paused at the door, sympathy and bitterness warring inside me. That's not my problem anymore. Before we continue further, thank you for listening to this story. If you're enjoying it, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support means everything, and there's much more to this revenge tale that you won't want to miss. My name is Lavana, and until 3 weeks ago, I was the Administrative Solutions Specialist at a mid-sized company selling industrial equipment. That impressive title translated to being the behind-the-scenes Atlas, holding an entire division on my shoulders. I didn't start out that way. 5 years earlier, I'd been hired as a coordinator, basic data entry, scheduling, and support. Within 6 months, my boss Weston began adding temporary responsibilities. Another department lost headcount. Could I help with their weekly reports? A senior analyst left. Could I maintain their client database? A director needed presentation support. Could I just handle that small task? Each request came with the same hollow promise. We'll revisit your compensation at your review. Each review came with the same excuse. Budget constraints this quarter. Each year, my workload doubled, while my title and salary barely moved. By year 3, I was secretly running operations for 3 different teams. The directors, Weston, Renner, and Vance, all took credit for my work in executive meetings. They'd forward my analyses with their names attached. They'd present my slides without acknowledgement. I developed stomach ulcers. My hair started falling out in clumps. I lost 20 pounds without trying. My mother didn't recognize me when I finally visited home last Christmas. Lavana, she'd said, touching my hollowed cheek. What are they doing to you at that place? That question haunted me for months until I finally gathered the courage to request a meeting with Weston and HR last month. I came prepared. A detailed breakdown of my actual duties versus my job description, market rates for each function I performed, documented overtime hours, and specific instances where my work had directly saved or made the company money. Weston leaned back in his chair, barely glancing at my materials. You know budgets are tight right now, Lavana. We simply don't have the resources to adjust compensation mid-year. I'm doing the work of 3 positions, I said, my voice shakier than I'd intended. I just need fair compensation. We appreciate your dedication, the HR representative said with practiced sympathy. But your position is classified at its appropriate level. Then reclassify it, I pushed. Or split the responsibilities appropriately. Weston's expression hardened. If the current arrangement isn't working for you, perhaps we should discuss alternatives. 3 days later, they announced a reorganization. My position would be eliminated, but they'd generously allow me to train my replacement before my departure. With 2 weeks severance, when Adira arrived, bright-eyed and clutching her leather portfolio, Weston had smirked. Just show her the basics. 2 weeks should be enough. Translation: don't let her know what she's really in for. Keep her blind until I'm gone. For 13 days, I did as instructed. I showed Adira the surface-level processes, introduced her around, demonstrated the basic functions of our systems. I didn't mention the executive who'd scream if reports weren't on his desk by 7:30 a.m. sharp. I didn't explain how to handle the client who demanded custom analytics every Tuesday, but refused to provide the necessary data until Monday evening. I didn't warn her about the regional managers who fought like territorial wolves over resources. I told myself it wasn't my problem. The company had discarded me like worn equipment. Why should I care what happened next? Then came day 14, and Adira found the complete requirements document I'd created months ago in a desperate attempt to prove my workload was unsustainable. Now she knew, and I still walked away. My phone rang at 8:42 p.m. that same evening. Lavana? Adira's voice was tight with stress. I'm still at the office. Vance is asking for an operations summary I know nothing about. And Renner just emailed about missing client reports. I let it go to voicemail. 4 more calls came through before midnight. 6 text messages the next day. 3 emails with increasingly desperate subject lines. Urgent. Need help with monthly close. Then, please. About to miss critical deadline. And finally, they're going to fire me. I deleted them all. By the end of week 3, my apartment had become a sanctuary of silence. No alarm clock, no late-night emails, no weekend emergency calls. I slept for 14 hours straight the first Saturday. On Sunday, I actually finished a novel I'd started 2 years ago. My phone lit up with an unfamiliar number on Monday morning. Is this Lavana? A deep voice I recognized as Kylan, the regional director. Yes, we need to talk. The Westridge account is threatening to walk. None of the reports are accurate. The presentations are missing crucial data. And frankly, the whole operation is falling apart. I said nothing. We'd like you to come back, just temporarily, as a consultant, to help. Smooth things over. Name your price. The silence stretched across the phone line as I considered Kylan's desperate request. 5 years of being undervalued, overlooked and overworked. Now they needed me. My consulting rate is $225 per hour, I said finally, with a guaranteed minimum of 30 hours weekly for 6 months. I work remotely except for client meetings, which will be scheduled during business hours only. I'll need written confirmation before I start. That's Kylan began, clearly calculating. That would be triple my former salary. Non-negotiable, I interrupted. And I'll need complete autonomy over my schedule and processes. Another pause. Fine. When can you start? I'll need the contract by tomorrow morning. I'll begin the day after it's signed. 48 hours later, I walked back through the office doors, not as the desperate employee who'd left with a cardboard box, but as an external consultant with leverage. Heads turned as I passed. Whispers followed. I had my hair styled that morning, wore a tailored suit I'd saved for months to buy, and carried a sleek leather portfolio instead of the company-issued notebook. I spotted Adira immediately. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her once pristine blazer was wrinkled at the elbows. When she saw me, her expression crumpled between relief and resentment. You're back, she said, voice hollow. Are you taking your job back? No, I replied, setting my bag on the conference room table. I'm here to fix the systems, not reclaim my position. Her eyes welled with tears. They're going to fire me. I've missed 3 major deadlines already. Renner called me incompetent in front of the entire team yesterday. I studied her, seeing myself 3 years ago, before the ulcers, before I'd learned that dedication meant nothing to people like Weston. Let's talk, I said, gesturing to the chair beside me. I'm not here to replace you or save you, but I will show you exactly what's happening and how to navigate it. For the next hour, I explained the reality she'd stumbled into, how the executives had systematically combined multiple roles while eliminating positions, how they took credit for work they didn't do, how they deliberately set impossible expectations to keep employees desperate for approval. But why help me now? Adira asked. You just walked away before. Because my goal isn't to punish you, I said. It's to make visible what they've been hiding. My first week back was strategic reconnaissance. I requested access to all systems, access they couldn't deny given the crisis with their accounts. I scanned emails, documentation, projection reports. I uncovered how thoroughly they'd erased evidence of my contributions over the years, replacing my name with theirs on every report and presentation. During client calls, I carefully noted how Weston and Renner blamed staffing transitions for the failures that were actually caused by their own refusal to properly staff the department. They'd promised improvements once the new team member gets up to speed, placing all responsibility on Adira's shoulders. By week 3, I began implementing my true plan. I created comprehensive process documentation, not just instructions, but with timestamps, effort estimates, and dependency maps that made the workflow visible. I built training modules that explicitly outlined which tasks belonged to which roles in a properly functioning department. When Vance asked me to finish a quarterly analysis, I explained that it would require 43 hours to complete properly, by design, impossible for one person to manage alongside regular duties. That's ridiculous, he scoffed. You used to get these done all the time. Yes, I agreed calmly. By working until 2 a.m. for a week straight, which is why my consulting agreement specifically prohibits that now. His face reddened. Then, what do you suggest? Divide the analysis components appropriately among 3 people, as the process was originally designed. By month 2, I'd mapped every broken process in the department. I'd documented every impossible expectation. More importantly, I'd begun properly training Adira, not as my replacement, but as someone who understood exactly what was reasonable to expect from her role. They're still pushing me to do everything, she confided during our weekly check-in. But now I can push back with actual data. According to the process documentation, this requires director approval before I can proceed. It's like having armor. I nodded. Document everything. Track your hours against the established benchmarks. When they ask for impossible things, respond in writing. The executives grew increasingly uncomfortable with my presence. I'd catch Weston watching me with narrow eyes when I presented unbundled workflow diagrams to the team. Renner stopped making direct requests and began routing everything through project management tools where his demands would be time-stamped and visible. Halfway through my contract, the regional director, Kylan, called me into his office. The documentation you're creating is extensive, he said carefully. It's what you hired me to do, I replied. Stabilize the processes. Yes, but there seems to be an emphasis on separating functions that we've traditionally had one person handle. I smiled. You mean functions you've traditionally had me handle? He shifted uncomfortably. The budget doesn't support adding headcount. Then the budget doesn't support the workload, I countered. You have 3 options. Reduce the deliverables, increase the resources, or continue watching clients walk away when deadlines are missed. That meeting initiated a power struggle that defined the next 3 months. The executives tried repeatedly to pull me back into directly doing the work. Rather than systematizing it, I refused each time, citing my contract terms. They tried reducing my hours. I reminded them of the guaranteed minimum. They suggested I train Adira to handle everything like you used to. I provided documented evidence of why that was impossible. Meanwhile, Adira was transforming. The nervous new hire became increasingly confident as she mastered the reasonable portions of her role. She began advocating for herself in meetings, armed with the process documentation I'd created. According to the workflow analysis, she would say when Vance tried dumping additional projects on her, this requires technical expertise from the operations team. Other employees began noticing. They'd approach me cautiously at first, then with increasing boldness. Could you document our department's processes next? Is it true that my job description only covers half of what I'm actually doing? Can you explain how to push back when they ask for impossible timelines? A subtle shift was occurring throughout the office, a quiet revolution of boundaries and documentation that made visible what the company had deliberately obscured for years. By month 5, the crisis point arrived. 2 more major clients threatened to leave after receiving incomplete deliverables. The quarterly projections showed alarming shortfalls. The regional headquarters began asking pointed questions about department performance. Kylan called an emergency meeting with the executive team. I was invited as the external consultant. "We need solutions," he announced, face grim. "Not excuses." Weston immediately turned to me. "Your documentation protocols are slowing everything down. People are refusing tasks because they're not in their job description." I opened my laptop. "Actually, I've prepared a comprehensive analysis of the department's challenges and 3 potential solutions." The projector illuminated with my presentation, months of meticulous data collection, displayed in stark, undeniable graphs. "Option 1, I began, clicking to the first slide, "requires restructuring the department to properly staff all functions currently being performed. Based on workload analysis, this means adding 3 full-time positions." Renner scoffed. "Impossible with current budgets." "Option 2, I continued without acknowledging him, involves eliminating approximately 40% of current deliverables to match existing staffing levels." "Our clients would never accept that," Vance interjected. "Option 3 is continuing as you are now, understaffing critical functions while demanding impossible output. My analysis shows this will result in losing approximately 30% of your client base within 6 months as service quality continues to deteriorate." The room fell silent as they stared at the projected losses on the screen. Kylan leaned forward. "These numbers can't be right." "Every calculation is documented in the appendix," I replied, including 5 years of data showing how consolidating positions has directly correlated with declining client satisfaction and increasing error rates. The tension in the room was thick enough to touch. My heart pounded, but my voice remained steady. This was what I'd been working towards since the day they'd asked me to train my replacement. For several moments, no one spoke. Weston's face had drained of color. Renner straightened his tie repeatedly. Vance stared at the ceiling as if answers might materialize there. Kylan finally broke the silence. "We need time to review these findings." "My contract ends in 3 weeks," I replied. "The complete analysis will be submitted then." As I gathered my materials, Weston leaned over. "What exactly are you trying to accomplish here?" he hissed, low enough that only I could hear. I met his eyes directly. "Transparency." The next morning, Adira texted me. "Emergency dept meeting called. All staff required. 10 a.m. conference room." I arrived precisely on time, choosing a seat near the back. The room was packed, not just with our department, but representatives from every division. The tension was palpable as Kylan entered, followed by someone I didn't recognize. A sharp-featured woman in an immaculate suit who surveyed the room with clinical detachment. "This is Thalia from regional headquarters," Kylan announced without preamble. "She'll be conducting a comprehensive departmental audit over the next 2 weeks." Weston's smile looked physically painful. "We welcome the opportunity to showcase our operational efficiencies." Thalia's expression remained neutral. "I've reviewed the preliminary findings from your consultant." She nodded toward me. "They've raised significant concerns at the executive level." For the next 2 hours, Thalia methodically outlined the audit process. Every employee would document their actual daily tasks versus their job description. All workflows would be mapped. All overtime would be tracked. All client complaints would be reviewed. As the meeting concluded, Renner intercepted me in the hallway. "You've made a serious mistake," he said, voice low and dangerous. "When this audit concludes, they'll see we've been running a lean, efficient operation. Your contract won't be renewed, and I'll personally ensure you never work in this industry again." "I welcome their scrutiny," I replied calmly. "In fact, I've prepared 5 years of my own documentation to assist their investigation." His confident expression faltered. "What documentation?" "Everything, Renner. Every after-hours email. Every directive to complete impossible tasks. Every instance where my work was presented as yours. Every denied request for proper staffing or compensation." I watched realization dawn slowly across his face. "You were planning this all along." "No," I corrected him. "You planned it when you decided one person should do the work of 3 for the salary of half." The following days brought a flurry of activity. Thalia's audit team set up in the conference room, interviewing employees one by one. I provided them with my comprehensive analysis, including historical data I'd been quietly archiving for years. Adira emerged from her interview looking stunned. They asked me to compare my actual workload to what I was told during hiring. she whispered. When I showed them the real position requirements document, the auditor literally stopped taking notes and just stared. By week 2, the executives rarely appeared in the office. Closed-door meetings at regional headquarters became the norm. Rumors circulated, budgets being re-examined, organizational charts being redrawn. On day 12 of the audit, my phone rang at 6:30 a.m. Lavana? It was Thalia. We need you at headquarters. 9 o'clock. The regional office occupied the top 3 floors of a downtown high-rise. I was escorted to a spacious conference room where Thalia waited alongside 3 people I recognized as higher-level executives from company photos. "Thank you for coming," said an older man who introduced himself as Barrett, the divisional president. "We've completed our preliminary audit findings." He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a document titled Organizational Restructuring Proposal. I skimmed it, my heart accelerating with each paragraph. "You're implementing option 1, I said, looking up. 3 additional positions." Thalia nodded. "Your analysis was conservative. If anything, we identified 5 roles that had been improperly consolidated." She paused. "We've also discovered concerning patterns in how executives have been claiming credit for work they didn't perform. The purpose of this meeting," Barrett continued, "is twofold. First, to inform you that Weston, Renner, and Vance are being placed on administrative leave pending further investigation." I maintained my neutral expression despite the surge of vindication I felt. "Second," he continued, "to offer you a position." He outlined their proposal: Director of Operational Excellence, reporting directly to regional leadership. Salary more than double what I'd been making before. Full authority to implement the systems I'd been documenting. A team of my own. "Why me?" I asked, genuinely curious. "I'm the one who exposed the problems." "Precisely," Barrett replied. "You identified systemic failures others either couldn't see or chose to ignore. You documented solutions rather than just complaints. And despite having every reason to simply walk away, you created a framework that will benefit the entire organization." I considered for a long moment before responding. "I'll need complete transparency in all communications, written confirmation of my authority to implement changes, and Adira gets promoted to team lead with appropriate compensation adjustment." Barrett smiled slightly. "Already done." She impressed the audit team considerably. 2 days later, I stood before the assembled department staff. The news of the executive's administrative leave had spread quickly. Faces looked up at me with mixtures of hope, wariness, and curiosity. "I'll be brief," I began. "The audit revealed what many of you already knew. This department has been systematically understaffed, while expectations continued to increase. That changes today." I outlined the restructuring plan, the new positions being created, the revised reporting structures. With each point, I saw shoulders relax, expressions lighten. "Adira will be taking over as operations team lead," I announced, gesturing to her. The surprise on her face was genuine. I'd been instructed not to tell her before the announcement. After addressing questions, I returned to what was now my office. As I organized my new workspace, Adira appeared in the doorway. "You planned this from the beginning," she said. "Not a question, but a realization. When you walked out that day, when you ignored my calls, when you came back as a consultant, this was always your endgame." I considered her words carefully. "Not exactly. When I left, I just wanted to escape. When I ignored your calls, I was protecting myself from being pulled back in. But when they asked me to return as a consultant, I paused. That's when I saw the opportunity to force them to face reality. By documenting everything they'd hidden," she finished. "The thing about people who take advantage of others," I said, "is that they rely on silence and isolation. They count on you feeling too overwhelmed to keep records, too desperate to speak up, too afraid to draw boundaries. So, your revenge was creating a paper trail?" I smiled. "My revenge was forcing transparency. The executives built their careers on taking credit for others' work, while deliberately understaffing departments. They hid the true workload from new hires like you. They counted on people burning out and leaving before they could cause problems. But you didn't leave," Adira said. "Not really." "No," I agreed. I came back stronger. That afternoon, I received an email from Thalia. The investigation had expanded to other departments. Similar patterns had been identified. Company-wide restructuring was being implemented. Attached was a copy of Weston's termination letter. 6 months later, our department ran smoothly, with proper staffing and clear boundaries. Adira thrived in her leadership role. The client retention rate climbed steadily, and I finally had weekends again. My ulcers healed. My mother said I looked like myself when I visited for her birthday. The greatest revenge wasn't getting people fired or taking their jobs. It wasn't even the satisfaction of proving I'd been right all along. It was creating a system where no one else would have to suffer as I had, where transparency prevented exploitation, where value was properly recognized and compensated. Sometimes the most devastating revenge is simply bringing everything hidden into the light. If you've stayed with me through this story, thank you. I hope it gives you courage if you're facing similar situations in your workplace. Remember that your worth isn't determined by how much abuse you can tolerate. Sometimes walking away isn't giving up. It's the first step toward reclaiming your power. If you found value in this story, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share your own experiences in the comments. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.